friends, it's Gwen. If you have a bunch of punches in your stash gathering dust, you are going to love today's video. It's time to pull them out and get creating. Today I've made two layouts. The first one uses a cut file and the second one shows you how you can recreate that cut file look using those punches. I have heaps to share with you, so let's get started. Here's a look at the products that I will be using. I have pulled out a square paper punch for today's layouts, and I'm using Pink Fresh Studios Flower Market Collection. I have a cut file from Cut to You. This one is called Diamonds and it actually comes in a couple of sections. So there's this big background piece and then the individual sort of diamond stripes that we're going to position. There is a link for the cut file in the description box below. I'm going to use the background section as a guide so that I know exactly where to put the paper strips, and you can see here too that I have backed the design in one of the pattern papers. I'm going for a very soft and delicate look for the layouts today. Once all the pieces are positioned, you can see that you can just lift off that backing part, and guess what? You can use that on another layout. So that's the look of our cut file. We now need to replicate that using our paper punch. The punch that I'm using today is a little bit over 1 inch. It's actually quite a bit of an odd size because it's not quite 1.5 inches, but it's a little bit more than 1.25 inches. I'm going to position the first square in the very center of the layout. This is a very centered design, and the easiest way to get that look is to work from the center outwards. This task will be made all the easier with a T-square ruler, so if you don't have one of those, I do recommend one. There is a link in the description box below. So I do have to punch out quite a few of these squares. I am just working around the edge of my pattern paper here, and what I'm going to do is line them up on the background exactly the same way as the cut file. I'm going to set up the center row first and then move out to the edges on the left and right. You'll see here I'm using my ATG to secure the paper pieces, and that's because that adhesive has a little bit of wiggle room in it. You can quite easily reposition things if you need to. The other benefit is that you can add stitching across that tape. It goes through the sewing machine quite well, and I am going to be adding stitching to both of my backgrounds. The other thing I wanted to mention here was that you don't even actually need a paper punch to recreate this look. These are just squares after all, so you could create these little pieces with your paper trimmer. The most important thing is to keep checking your measurements. So I am working center outwards, and then I'm also taking note of the center of each of the diamonds. I'm making sure that the sides are symmetrical, and to do that I'm using the guides on my ruler, so the actual measurements on my ruler, to line everything up. Now I did run into a small problem here. My squares are actually slightly bigger than the cut file. So when I laid it all out, I couldn't get the extra rows in. Lucky for me, the tape is repositionable, so I did just scooch everything in towards the center line, and then I was able to add in those extra 2 rows. I could have left them off altogether, but for the purpose of this video, I am trying to recreate that cut file look. I am going to take both of my backgrounds away and add some stitching to the background, and here you can see just how similar they now look. I have also gone away and backed my photos, and now it's time to add all of the pretty embellishments. This is the second video in this mini series, so if you missed the first video, I'll leave a card for that here. You can watch that when you're done watching this one. Creating 2 pages at once like this is a little different to my normal process. I did learn the first time around that I have to be a little bit careful about the embellishments that I use, because I know I need to split what's useful over 2 layouts. I do end up embellishing the pages very similarly, and I need to be careful that I'm not using all the perfect colors on one layout and then leaving myself short on the second page. Side note, I have found this process to be a way to actually scrapbook faster because I'm creating 2 layouts at once. I'm using the same formula, I'm using the same supplies. My mind is in the flow of creating creating with these things, and I found that the second layout comes together really, really quickly. I'm using the same photo here as a way to demonstrate to you that you can get the same look without cut files. But if you switched out your photos and had these layouts in totally different albums, I bet you wouldn't even know. I would be very surprised if one of your family members said, "Oh, hey, isn't that the same as that other layout?" Okay, so let's talk about the design for the page. For this one, I am keeping things very simple. The beauty of filling the background with those squares is that that fills out the page. So we really only need to add maybe a couple of embellishment blocks. I'm going to keep the photo more towards the right-hand side of the layout, and then I'm going to add the main embellishment block on the left-hand side of the photo. With a cut file like this, you do have a couple of options. I could have ran all of the elements down that center line of the layout and kept with that idea of everything coming off that center line. But I wanted to mix it up, so I have shifted everything ever so slightly to the right. I personally prefer the subjects in my photos to be looking towards the center of the layout. That is not a rule. There are no rules in scrapbooking. That's just the way that I like it. So it did make sense for me to put the photo on the right-hand side. If my daughter was facing the other way, I would have put her on the left-hand side. For the embellishment clusters, I am going with the tried and true visual triangle. I find this works best when you have one main cluster and then two supporting smaller clusters. So in this case, the main one is the one on the left-hand edge of the photo, and then the two supporting ones are the ones on the right where I'm working there, and then the one in the top left-hand corner of the photo. Things are getting serious because I am gluing stuff down. If you're enjoying this video so far, I would love it if you would give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. As always with my embellishment clusters, I'm working largest through to smallest, and it does get to a point where the layout feels a little bit papery. I know that sounds ridiculous because yes, it's paper, but it gets to a point where I want it to have some extra texture. I want it to have some extra details, and often that comes in the form of chipboard or puffy stickers. I do prefer to add those elements more towards the end of my creating process. I like them to be more finishing touches. I'm going to call this one done right here. Here's a quick close-up. I will share detailed images later on in the video. On to layout number 2, and you can already see that it does look quite similar. I'm going to position my photo slightly to the right in the same way that I did for the first layout. I found a similar pocket and tag element that I can add on the left. I got super lucky because it actually has the same text, "Love this." It just so happens that that's printed on the card, and on the first layout that was a die cut. Did you notice the banner piece there at the bottom of the photo? They are pretty similar too. They are exactly the same size. They are just a different sentiment and a different color. Are you wondering why I'm pointing these little details out? Well, that's to help you recreate this layout at home. You don't even need this specific collection. What you can do is just match elements. So for example, the squares in my background, that's a floral pattern paper. Find a floral pattern paper in your stash that you love and use that. Find a portrait black and white photo that you can use, and then match the other elements that I'm creating with. So you'll need some kind of tag and pocket, and remember too, you could even make one. Next, find yourself some floral die cuts and add them in the same positions that I'm adding them to here. You're making your main cluster on the left and then adding in your two supporting clusters. If you've been asking me about an embellishment cluster tutorial, I know many of you have, that is in the works. My top tip that you can work with right now is to imitate clusters that you like. So if you like the look of my clusters on these layouts, copy them. You can absolutely substitute the supplies too, and you will still get a similar look. You may be surprised by how much you learn just by imitation. Tag me on social too so I can see what you make. It's time to make this one feel less papery, so I do have some more puffy stickers. The set didn't have items that were too similar, so I did have to mix things up. Oh yes, and it was at this point that I wanted to switch these over. I just felt that the colour match was better this way around. I am going to fuss and fill out these floral clusters just a little bit more. They were not quite as layered as I wanted them to be. This is the main reason that I don't glue things down as I go. I really like to look at the layout as a whole when it's more completed and then lock everything in place, because I change my mind. The really tricky thing with floral clusters too is that I like them to look very natural. I don't like them to look placed, but of course I'm placing them. So yeah, it's a bit of juggling that needs to happen to get that look. I had added one of these dimensional stickers to the first layout, so of course I want to do that to this page. I'm going though with the heart-shaped one. The first layout had a circle, but I really liked how the heart fit into that top left-hand corner there. I mention that because if you're recreating this layout, don't be afraid to make slight adjustments and substitutes. It all works out. This is all coming together super well, and I do want to leave you here with a bunch of close-up images. You can see the stitching detail and then of course all of the layers in my embellishment clusters. I often add 3D foam in between them just for a little bit extra dimension. You can see here too the puffy stickers and those little chipboard pieces. And here's a final look of the two layouts side by side so that you can see just how similar they turned out. Thanks for being here, my creative friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to watch this one next. In it, I share a bunch more tips and tricks for using your paper punches. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, bye.